Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us on our first crafting conversation. And today we're really excited to be speaking to Dan, and Dan's going to introduce himself in a second and the role that he has. Both Chloe and I are going to be kind of asking questions today, and we're going to explore about how we can bring job crafting to life. So Dan, could you please introduce ourselves to everyone, and could you also say a little about your job and what is it you enjoy about your job, and maybe something that you loathe? So we talk about loving and loathing in tailored thinking. So tell us something that you love about your job, and maybe something that brings you maybe not loathe but less energy than other people might find.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. Very honored to be the first participant in the crafting conversations. So my name is Daan. I'm the Chief Experience Officer for Dreamplex. This is kind of like a network of flexible offices in Vietnam. So we partner with companies to really think through how can they improve their employee experience and how can they make their company a great place to work. So I would say in that my favorite part is the creativity. So I get to be creative on a lot of different fronts every single day. Sometimes it's literal creativity when I'm designing a new office. So currently we're designing a 7,500 square meter, which is about 80,000 square feet warehouse conversion, sitting in a tropical garden as kind of like a new place for big companies in Vietnam to put their teams. So that's one way I'm creative in my day-to-day. And then I'm also really thinking through how to motivate teams internally and also with our partner companies, thinking through how can we kind of structure teams in the best way. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I get to be creative about, which I really enjoy. Maybe something I don't like so much, and to you guys, this will not come as a surprise because we had to reschedule 3 times. The thing I probably like least about my job is that there's a lot of demand on the calendar. And so the struggle of every day is sort of aligning appointments and making sure that everyone gets their time. Probably not my favorite part. Admin work, which I'm sure will be very similar for most people.
Yeah, those meetings do get you down, but when you're in demand, it's difficult to say no to those things. So thanks very much for introducing yourself and Dreamplex. And Chloe's going to ask you some more questions in a second about what you do, but we just think it's fantastic to see how how Dreamplex is an innovative organization is seeing job crafting as a way to kind of tap into the strengths and talents of the people that work for you. So Chloe, do you want to ask some follow-up questions?
Yeah. So what experiences do you want to create for the people who work at Dreamplex?
Good question. And it's my job, so I should know, right? So basically, yeah. Before I joined, my current CEO and myself, we read this article in HBR, which was called "Every Company Needs a Chief Experience Officer." And we were like, why? And what is it? And basically, it's the idea that employee experience and customer experience go hand in hand. So if you craft really great employee experiences, you also craft really great customer experiences. And in our case, there's sort of a second layer to it because our customer experience basically is delivering employee experience, right? Through other companies. And so what I like the most about kind of, my role in that sense is kind of thinking through, on a day-to-day basis, like how can we create a great employee experience for our team? And then also every time we do something, we implement something like job crafting to think about how can we then introduce it to our partner companies. So that may be a small startup, that may be a larger enterprise, local or international. We can then share with them that like, hey, actually, this is not just theory. This is something that we've tried with our team. It worked really well. And here's how you can do it. And so we do that with job crafting, for example. So we have Rob speaking this week to our member companies and introduce them to the idea of job crafting. But we've also, for example, done that with, how to run a really great team meeting, how to run a really great town hall. What are some ways that you could innovate your hiring process? So that's really where the two kind of like sides of what the product that we deliver and then the people that deliver it really come together. And so in my mind, and also thinking about what young Vietnamese really wants, the best thing that we can deliver to our team is a sense of ownership showing them that they're achieving things a lot of the times, their personal growth, their professional growth. And I think just having a lot of fun, being part of like a fast growing company and feeling that you're contributing to something, quite big. So that's what I always try to kind of like emphasize, that, hey, we really are kind of in this rocket ship. We're creating something really unique in the market. We're doing something that no one else is doing. It's resonating, it's working, and therefore we're constantly expanding. And I think the more that people feel like they're part of something that's really interesting, and then they also feel like they're growing themselves, both personally and professionally, yeah, that's really what I try to sort of emphasize in, what we offer to our teams.
That's great. So that idea of ownership and growth, yeah, amazing. And you talk about personalizations. The first time I came across the kind of, Dan, the work that you're doing is through a podcast that you're interviewing, and you were talking very much around personalization. So how do you feel kind of personalization is the heart of that, in terms of that idea of kind of growth personally and professionally, and also connection to the work that you're doing within Dreamplex?
Yeah, so personalization is probably, if there was some kind of like prize or award for every time I say the word personalization, I would be super rich, because it's probably like the number one thing that we're preaching here in the market. And just for context, right? Like Vietnam is a developing economy. The good thing is that we controlled COVID really well, which is why kind of like we're the only market in the region, at least, that will see GDP growth this year. And that is a boost, but it's still a developing market. So it is kind of a market where maybe 20, 30 years ago, office work didn't really exist as it did in many other markets already. So it really is quite young in terms of companies starting to understand how to motivate people beyond just kind of showing up in the morning, doing a fingerprint scanner, or now it's sometimes facial recognition, so that the boss knows you're there in the system, and then fingerprint scanning at the end of the day. Kind of a little bit factory mentality, right? You're rewarded for the hours that you're there, and that's it. And that worked really well when there wasn't such a demand for like really good young talents. But now that there are more and more companies all competing for the same talents, a lot of startups, a lot of pretty, kind of like a lot of scale-ups as well. So there's a lot of competition for talent. And now companies sort of have to start thinking about, okay, if everyone wants to get that best sales guy or the best marketing guy or the best designer or the best engineer, the best programmer, how do I set myself apart? And for me, the solution really is in personalization. And I think that really comes from the fact that we need to be much more employee-centric. And when you want to be really employee-centric, you basically need to listen to people and hear what they want, and then do things that work for people in the aggregate, but also for people individually. And so that's why we talk a lot about personalization, like how can you get someone into a job and then constantly recraft that job so it really fits with them. These people are young and they're constantly developing themselves. So that also means that, planning 6 months or 12 months in advance is actually really hard to do, because you may discover something about yourself or about your job that, turns, a completely different direction. And so for companies to be very stuck in, this is your job description, this is what you're going to be doing, and related to that, this is what you're going to be learning. And this maybe is what you're going to get in terms of how we're going to activate you in a social way or in a team setting, right? And so our whole idea is that you need to offer a lot of choice, and that starts obviously with the job itself, but it also goes into all those related areas where it's like, we always hear about kind of the cliche, once a month or once a week, kind of like company happy hour. And everyone kind of like rushes in, people quickly get the free food and drink, and then everyone runs out because 99% of people here are quite introverted. They're not at all used to kind of standing by, let's say, the beer tap and sort of like pitch their story to everyone who wants to hear it. So that's as an example. You can do social activities. Obviously, it's a big part of being at work. It's being social, and it's having those opportunities to celebrate and do something fun. But maybe you can do that for the 40 out of 70 employees who enjoy it. And then for the other 30, you can think about, well, what would they like to do, right? If you're going to spend that time and those resources and that budget on these activities, how could you do it in a way that people actually really appreciate it, so that it's effective as kind of like an employee engagement tool? And so that's really where our thinking is going. It's like, okay, if you could break up that total universe of all these people and you understand individually what these people want, then probably you can break them up into smaller, groups within a larger community and say, okay, for this group, we're going to do a big social outing. For this group, we're going to be doing a calligraphy workshop. For this group, we're going to be doing meditation, and then let people choose how they want to engage at work.
I love that. So the idea of bringing choice in there, and around there's not one size doesn't fit all for everyone. That's a really refreshing, unfortunately refreshing. It's a very simple approach for something that's straightforward that people don't often do. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I've never heard anyone say that before, like about, say, like a company party, and you don't think of the people that might be introverted and might actually not enjoy that, and that's their reward. What's the idea of job crafting then, Dan?
So actually, a long time, even before I started in this role and really started thinking about a much broader way of personalizing, like all these things we just talked about, I actually already had heard about job crafting. I came across it through, I think good question, actually. I think I came across it when I was doing an online course in positive psychology, and I think one of the modules was about work, and I think one of those elements was job crafting. And to me, when I heard that, I mean, as with every kind of new concept, right, it takes a little while to sort of permeate your brain and it starts actually making sense. But that was one of those things that just kind of made sense quite immediately. And especially when we're seeing, like in this market, but I think it's very similar in other markets too, where people switch jobs so easily. You know, there's a lot of kind of companies that are talking about Gen Z in Vietnam and how 6 to 9 months in a job seems to be kind of stretching it, seems to be kind of the max, you know, and if people stay a year, that's like almost unheard of. And I think it comes from that fact that, you know, these people are developing so quickly. Like when you were 22, 23 years old, there's so many things that are changing constantly. And so the person that took that job today is not the same person 6 months from now. And therefore there may not be a fit anymore. So that whole concept just made so much sense to me, because if people change like every 3 to 6 months, like why would the job be exactly the same? And as a company, you're really on the losing end, because it basically means that you're always going to be losing these people because you don't have the flexibility to adapt with them as they grow. And I think, like I said, this must be true in a lot of markets, but the reason why I think it really works in Vietnam is that the whole country is changing so fast and the whole country is in such an upswing that also just in terms of like what is today the best company to work for may not be the same company 6 months from now or 12 months from now, or a whole new industry may be born. There's so many young kind of like industries that are coming up all the time that I think there's just constantly all these like little kind of like triggers to people to rethink, why are they still in that job? Like there may be some like really cool new company that they hadn't heard of before, or there may be like a breakthrough new startup that they want to be a part of. So I think that that's why it's even more relevant here.
Yeah, just building on that, Dan. So I think in terms of, it's fantastic to kind of hear also about how you kind of stumbled upon job crafting. And I love the idea as well that I struggle with, or I guess often when I see other people, they talk about job crafting, they like the idea of a concept, but then it's like, well, how do we, I don't really quite know what that means in real life and practice. And one of the things that I'm inspired by your work is the fact that obviously within Dreamplex, you've brought job crafting to life. So you've actually, use it within the organization. So could you say a little bit about that in terms of how you've brought job crafting to life, or how you bring job crafting to life with your colleagues?
Yeah, so kind of how I shared in the beginning that we sort of have this really interesting interplay between the product that we deliver and the company that we are. And so almost everything that we eventually share out to our partner companies as something for them to think about, it typically starts, it kind of like goes through 3 stages. The first one is, it's with me and my direct team. So I typically pilot stuff directly with them. And then once that works, we sort of broaden it to the entire company. And once it works in the total company, we can then sort of safely expose it to the outside world. And so that's really where it started. It started with kind of like my own core team. And so it's kind of like, it's an experience design team. So these are people who are thinking through, what is it like to come to work and how can we make that better? And that could be interior design, it could be architecture, it could be graphic design, it could be training and development, it could be well-being initiatives. It's kind of like all these different elements combined. And so, yeah, with them, I started really early on having these conversations, and I put together kind of like a template that said, very cliche, where do you see yourself 18 months from now? I don't use 5 years or 10 years because I know it will never happen. But I always joke kind of like, hey, if everything goes really, really well, you'll still be here 18 months from now. And, knowing what you know now and thinking what you think now, where would you like to be 18 months from now? And then sort of once we've said that, we can sort of calculate backwards. So if you need to be in 18 months from now, you want to be in this position, or you want to have done this, where do you need to be in 12 months from now? And therefore, where do you need to be in 6 months from now? And therefore, where do you need to be in 3 months from now? And that's basically our starting point when someone has finished probation, which means they're 2 months into the journey. They kind of have seen the realities of working for the company, of doing the job that they're doing. So then basically we set this sort of 18-month plan and calculating backwards to where they need to be. And then I always tell them that that's a great plan, but plans are there to be changed. So what we will do is that actually every 3 months, we will sit together, we will look again at this plan, and we will see, are you making the progress that you were trying to make? Have you learned things along the way that are actually different from what you originally thought about? And therefore, is that 18-month goal still the same? And so we're constantly kind of adapting it. And this is kind of why I like very practically working in Google Docs, that we can change the 18-month sort of goal and the plan. And then you can actually go into previous versions and you can see kind of how it's changed over time. And then basically, and it's happened a lot actually, that people say, even 3 months after setting the original goal, it's oh, now that I've been in the role for 3 more months, I realize this is really the part I like a lot. Or actually, I'm seeing a completely different team that I would love to be a part of. And then we just completely adjust. So we just give them the feeling of actually, I think the number one misconception, but probably it's not a misconception, it's probably true, that people have about work is that whatever my job is, that's what my job is. And that's sort of the thing that I have to really forcefully deprogram in people's minds, that actually no, you are the person you are and you are doing the thing that you do, but that will change and therefore the job should change as well. And so I have to sort of deprogram and sort of remind that actually we will adjust your quote unquote job description to wherever you want it to go. And sometimes it's very extreme, like moving to a different team, but sometimes it's also just retweaking, refining what that is. And obviously it also aids us in developing better job descriptions, because then the next time we post something out, we probably have a much better idea of, what did we pitch out? What was the idea that we sold as what this job is going to be versus what's the reality? What's the 20, I always talk about the 20%. What's the 20% of stuff you really hate doing in your job? And how can we cut that out? How can we delegate it to someone else? How can we automate it? Whatever that is. Mm-hmm. But that's probably the next time I would hire a person, that's probably the thing that I would not even put in the job anymore.
Yeah, so we need to automate your meetings for you in a better way for you, Dan. But I love that approach of that idea of having to think about your job is continually evolving, and it should continually evolve. And I often talk about this idea that if your job is exactly the same in a year's time, either the organization's failed that person, or that person's failed you a little bit, in terms of in a nice way, but actually things should evolve and iterate. It's not standing still. And I love that challenge of the fact that the job isn't the one you've got now, isn't going to be that's it, not for life. It's effectively, it's for you to mold and shape and encourage people to do that. But that's a mindset shift as well, as you were saying. Yeah, that's
why it's so difficult, because I think generally there's a huge gap. And again, I'm talking about Vietnam because I'm just most familiar with this market, and it's kind of the first time I'm running a team like that. Not within a larger system, basically. In Vietnam, I think there's such a huge gap between someone who comes out of university, what they've learned, what they've gained, and then what they really need to be effective in the workforce. Yeah. I think there's just such a huge gap there. And generally, and again, I'm not saying that's true for everyone, but generally people have this feeling that people who come out of university, especially until maybe some more modern universities came into the market, they were really ready to just follow orders. So it's a very sort of, they're programmed towards a very hierarchical situation where they really get taught for 4 years straight, and maybe also all the years before that the best thing you can do is to just follow what your superior says. Again, very much I think it's very much kind of a factory mindset, right? As long as you kind of follow what needs to get done, then that's basically work. And so the only thing you put in is that kind of following the leader, doing the work that gets done, and then that needs to get done, and then the only reward is your salary. So I think that's really like how people come into the workforce, and then they sort of get into a job where that's exactly the case. Where as long as you kind of show up before the boss arrives and go home after the boss leaves, as long as you follow exactly what people are asking you to do, that's kind of what's considered successful. And that's how you raise up. And there's not at all this idea of thinking about outside of the box, thinking creatively, taking risk, failure is good, all that stuff. It just doesn't exist. And so it's really these like concepts that we have, these like mental concepts that we have to break and basically say, no, not at all. Because then you get this like very fatalist attitude where people feel like, oh, I don't like this company, or I don't like this job. And that's why they start looking around 3 to 6 months into the role to another job at another company. And of course, that's why I get so many resumes on my desk that are just increments of 6 months, little trial periods, working here, working here, working here. Sometimes there's like starting my own business in the mix there. There's like 6 months of like setting up an event company, or 6 months of helping my family business or something like that. But yeah, that's, I think, what people come in, and like what we really have to sort of really break this idea of like, no, it's your job and you're empowered to change it. And not only that, we will support you. We'll actually help you to do that. Yeah.
That's amazing. So before we ask about your advice for, or closing ask you about your advice for crafting and how you may have brought this to life, I've just got another question on that. So in terms of, you mentioned about the mindset of trying to break the mindset, or sort of encourage people to think differently. And obviously there's cultural issues there, but also educational issues. When you're recruiting for this, then do you find that actually you're able to differentiate between this and make that a distinctive kind of offering in terms of when people are coming to you? Or do you find that actually it's really difficult for people to get a sense of what this looks like until they're actually within Dreamplex themselves and you support them when they're here?
Okay, yeah, that's actually a really good question, because I think, as with many things, like I'm very enthusiastic about things, and then like when I sell it, I think it works. But I think it's definitely not at a sort of like company level yet, where everyone knows like how to sell this benefit. And I also think that, yeah, for a lot of people, it's probably a bit too conceptual. But what we can very easily explain to them is that, look, this is a starting point. And we sort of say it in the job interview, and we kind of refresh it in the onboarding day, that whatever your job is today is a starting point, and we will work together to make sure it always fits you. And so I think the concept of coaching is more familiar with people. So we typically just say like, oh, well, we will coach you throughout. And if that means we have to change kind of like your job, your role, it will work. But I definitely think that it's something that comes to life once you kind of like do it, and once you start to understand it. And especially because, sort of like that idea of like inertia, and people, once something is in your brain, it's really hard to kind of like remove it, right? So I definitely think that, it's hard to, not only properly convey it, but for people to truly believe it.
Yeah.
Because I've heard people say that like job interviews is kind of 30 or 60 minutes of two people lying to each other. Like the employer is lying about how great this company and this role is, and the employee is lying about how great they are at their job and how committed they're going to be and how good they are. And I think it's a little bit of that. I think that like whatever you would say in a job interview is typically just taken as a sales pitch. Like these benefits are like, oh, you're just trying to sell this like job to me. And this idea that someone is actually going to like personally coach you throughout your career, and is going to help you adapt your role, and is going to take away that 20% of your job you don't like, the part you loathe, is kind of unbelievable. Yeah. Then what happens, it's yeah.
And I imagine as well there's a subtle shift between someone maybe crafting their job, personalizing job, because you're encouraging them to do that. So they're wanting to do it because you're encouraging them as a leader, and they want to do what the leader's encouraging people to do. So they want to kind of be a good employee from that perspective. And there's a change between that. There's one way people might craft their jobs because they're expected to, but the real power, as you'll know, is when they actually feel that there's benefits for them in terms of doing it as well. So I imagine that's kind of the gold for this, in terms of when people actually find that. But it will take some time and some learning for people to get comfortable in crafting and shaping their roles.
And probably also, like, I think that's totally true. And probably also in, how do they then experience it, right? Like someone may call that, oh, I'm crafting crafting my job, or like we are practicing job crafting, and someone may just say, oh, the company really supports me, or, you know, like people are really attentive to what I want to do. And so how it gets played back can also kind of like differ from person to person. Like a while ago, we had this like panel discussion that one of my team members was on, and the moderator was asking kind of about work and about life and about work and life, and, you know, how does your company support you and all these things. And she kind of said that like, oh, what I really like about working for Dreamplex is that, you know, my manager like really listens to me and is trying to support me in what I want to do, so my work doesn't get boring. I was like, you know, so okay, so that's basically how it comes across, right? It's like, it doesn't have to be this like academic.
But it sounds great though, doesn't it? It sounds great.
Right.
Like, that's
maybe that's how we should pitch it. Yeah.
Well, yeah, we don't want your job to be boring. We care about you as an individual, and we want to have a conversation with you and show our support. I mean, they're amazing things. I love that. Yeah, maybe we should repitch it in that way. So Chloe, just over to you some other questions.
Yeah, well, you pretty much covered what I was just going to ask, but do you have any specific examples of how people have individually job crafted at Dreamplex?
Yes, I think 6 months ago the answer would have been not really, but now we have a lot of examples, so that's really good, I think. So yeah, I think a lot of my team members actually have seen quite interesting moves in their role and their organization. So maybe one example to highlight is someone who came in as an events executive. So she was basically hired because we run a lot of events, kind of like community events. So all these things that allows people to personalize their work experience. And she really came in to basically run like literally like executional work to, you know, align, you know, who would be organizing that event, and like the logistics of getting people on site and driving registrations and communication, like all those things. And then in the process of kind of like setting goals and talking about what she wanted to do, she actually told me that, you know, she had on her own, like even outside of what anyone wanted from her or what her job required her to do, she had been studying HR, and she actually just finished, or is in the process of finishing, her master's. And she said, well, if I really could choose, and I was like, yes, you can. Yes, you can. It's up to you. If I could really choose, then I would love to get into HR. And actually my final sort of goal would be to be like an HR business partner. And so I said, okay, so your goal is to be an Hrbp and you're an event executive now. So what would that journey look like? Like, how would you go from there to there? So then we kind of more collaboratively looked into, okay, what are kind of the key requirements for an Hrbp? Like, what would that role requirement, like the job requirement, look like? And what are all the things that you could do over the course of getting there, with some kind of more intermediate goals, of course, of that transition process? You know, what would that look like? What are the things that you could learn in your day-to-day work right now that would actually contribute to learning towards that role? And what are maybe, you know, as part of this conversation of loving and loathing, what are the things that you're currently doing that you feel like, especially in that context, is just a complete waste of your time? And what could we basically take out of your role that, you know, would free you up to start doing and learning the things that, you know, would apply to the role that you're kind of like going into? And so that's how we took it. And so now she's like well on her way on that journey, already transitioned job title, already transitioned job description, and also with a very sort of like clear view on what is yet to come. And so I think, again, it's a very rewarding experience for us both. And again, like a huge company benefit, because that person could basically, if we never had that conversation, if we never had implemented that framework of these goal settings and quarterly check-ins on top of just the weekly one-on-ones, if we never had those moments to sit down and talk outside of your day-to-day, where do you need support, but literally, let's look forward again. Like, you know, let's step out of your day-to-day and let's look forward. If we wouldn't have done that, you know, I think that person would have just done the same thing for another 4 to 5 months, and then I would have gotten a termination notice. Like, I can almost guarantee that if we could have followed that sort of in parallel, if there was like splitting lives,
you could see it playing out, couldn't you? Yeah, you could see that kind of playing out. Amazing.
I can just imagine that moment that a termination notice would have hit my desk with something like, I want to explore other things, or what we hear a lot is like, You know, like, oh, it's not you, it's me, kind of like, oh, I would love to work, but unfortunately I cannot continue here because I have to support my family business, or like there's always like these kind of like things. But I could totally see that happening. And I would say there's actually multiple cases of people that otherwise for sure would have gone towards that.
Yeah, wow. So you could have always see those things happening. And if you hadn't had that conversation, you wouldn't have been able to tap into that person's kind of interest and kind of growing expertise in terms of HR and be able to tap into that. I love that.
You literally just wouldn't have known. That's why, you know.
Yeah, and I wonder how many other people. Yeah, and I wonder how many other organizations there are, how many people there are working organizations that you could have that conversation about, that actually their kind of their resignation letter is a month or two away, that you could stop from happening by having these kind of conversations.
It's not only about people who want to directly change roles, who want to go a completely different direction, but generally, if you could go through your organization and get the 20 or 30% of tasks out of people's day-to-day work that they really don't like doing, which means they disproportionately spend time on that, or at least disproportionately spend their energy on that, and you could take it out and you could get people to apply all their time and energy and effort and passion to the things that they actually like doing, I think it's going to have an outsized effect on the company in terms of how effective, how great the mood is in the company, how things work, how things click together. And also, I think these conversations help a lot in terms of discovering people's maybe innate passions. Like maybe like, you know, oh, I wish I could do that, but you know, I know that's not my job, but you know, I see this person does this. Maybe there is that sort of, you know, like the Google 20% rule. Like maybe you can actually continue your day job, but you're going to allocate 20% to support this team on this specific project, or to help out on this specific thing. And it could just make such a richer experience. And again, as the company, you just get so much more benefit out of it, because people are applying and their time and their energy and passion towards something they like doing. It must just be so hugely beneficial. I don't know, actually, everything I'm saying is just I've heard about this theory, I'm trying to do it, but you guys are the real experts, so you have to tell me. Well, there must be some kind of research around.
Not at all, not at all. But I think it was really interesting that we had a session with the CIPD last week, which is the Europe's biggest HR institute in the UK, and we had a manager there who has brought job crafting to life with an organisation we work with, and one of the things that she said that her learning about job crafting is that it had a disproportionate impact in the way that you've just said the same thing, in the fact that inviting a small change from an individual impacts not just that individual, but their colleagues and the organization, and actually it has positive to kind of magnified effects if it works well. And obviously sometimes someone will job craft in a way or try something that they don't enjoy doing, and it may not have the impact that you want, but when it works well, she was describing the fact that actually the impact was much wider than just that individual as well. It seemed with other people as well. So I totally agree with it. I think the challenge as well, based on this 20% notion as well in terms of moving, is that around actually how do you manage that, and how do you enable that to happen? And I think a lot of organizations from a mindset or technical perspective struggle to kind of actually envisage what that looks and feels like, and it's much more, when I've seen it work well, it's much more innate, it's much more organic, it's much more kind of iterative than kind of slicing and dicing 20% here and moving someone around. It's around actually kind of much more fluid than that. But I think a lot of organizations sometimes are concerned about actually structurally how do they allow people to do this 20% or whatever, and that's not the case.
So it's very cultural as well within the company. Like you need to have a culture for like not only adapting individual roles, but basically that whatever the company is today is not the company 6 months from now, because everyone will have evolved and our understanding of the market will be better and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. So this has been a really rich conversation. We could literally talk to you for hours, Dan, but we'll save you that and save people listening to that. But we have a final question that we're going to ask everyone in this series. And Chloe, do you want to ask Dan the final question?
How have you job crafted your job, Dan?
Yeah, so I feel like I job craft my own job pretty much every day. That's why probably it also resonates so much with me, because I'm very, I don't know, like I can just not live with kind of like status quo. I cannot really live with feeling like I have not like nothing is changing, like I'm stuck in something. So I think I job prep with myself a lot, and probably on like a daily or weekly basis, where I kind of, take stock of what I'm doing, and where do I spend time and energy that's really well spent and it's really effective, and where I do spend time and energy that's really not effective, and can I change it? And yeah, I have a lot of these kind of like moments where I realize that, sometimes something has to happen for a while before I kind of recognize the pattern and I can adjust for it. But yeah, there's been a lot of change just over the last maybe year and a half, like within this role, where I've changed, my own job. And I think honestly, it doesn't only apply to work, but I really think it applies to life as well. I think if you can be very self-aware and very inquisitive about, what's working for me, what isn't, you can actually improve your life a lot too, because there may be things that, your daily routine that's just not working for you, or just like certain things in the relationship that you have that are not working. I think a lot of the time you kind of just like let it drag on and you don't really take action, you don't really take control. But a lot of the times these things, again, they're not as fixed as we think they are. And there actually is a lot of opportunity to change. I apply it a lot. So I think where I was like a year and a half ago to where I'm now, it's very different, kind of in all aspects of my being.
Yeah, life personally.
You're not just job crafting, you're life crafting.
Life crafting. Rob, next book.
Yeah, maybe
personalisation in life.
So Dan, thank you so much for your time and being the first person to have a crafting conversation with us at Tailored Thinking. If people wanted to find out more about Dreamplex and about yourself, what's the best way of getting in touch with you or following you?
And I would say that in terms of learning more about us, I'm not sure how relevant it is to people outside of Vietnam, but about the company you can find on our website, which is dreamplex.co. And for me, I'm very engaged on LinkedIn. So if you look up my name on LinkedIn, then you can connect with me, and happy to share more.